Hey there, Rabanzo here. Ron Klimek is my guest for this episode. We talk about our respective music journeys, finding one's creative voice, and starting a new band together. Let's do this. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Ron Klimek is a new neighbor, pal, and musician friend of mine. We hit it off so well, we started a band, a trio called R2V. At the time of this recording, which by the way is in mid-December 2019, we are preparing for our first local show, which is in late December of 2019. 2020 is staring us in the face. It's a cover band, but Ron and I are talking about writing some music together, which is super exciting. We also talk about our respective meanderings in music, rekindling dormant musicianship, creative opportunity in covers, DJs, AI, playing with tracks, and my alternate podcast recording rig. Much of the reason I invited Ron to be on the podcast was to test out this aforementioned alternate recording rig. I typically do interviews via Skype, sometimes with my interviewee on Skype, other times with my interviewee on their phone, but always remote. And Ron's here. He's a cool guy. He's a good musician. I was like, hey man, be on the podcast. Help me revisit this in-person recording rig that I have. And for any of you who are podcasters who, like me, haven't done many in-person interviews, maybe none at all, I will list the gear used for this episode in the show notes. And you can figure out what you might want to do for your own in-person interviews. But I think it went pretty well. I have some editing challenges, which are not real big challenges, just, it's different than what I normally do, or have my editor do, that is. But anyway, Ron and I also talked about the question, is music deteriorating? We sound like a couple of old guys. Music has left us behind. Ron even goes as far as to blame targeted marketing by the music industry, targeted toward millennials. I don't know about that, but true or not, there's a lot of music out there, and Ron and I agreed to a homework assignment whereby we'll explore the current musicscape to see what we can find in the way of real talent, creativity, and innovation in music. We are obviously optimistic we're going to find plenty of good stuff. But I think we both agree we're going to have to dig a little deep. A lot of the stuff that's on the surface is, maybe it's deteriorated. I don't know. People seem to get into it, but maybe people's tastes have deteriorated. We are marketed to relentlessly by everyone, aren't we? You know what, though? I have a great head start in this homework assignment because I have the archives of the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I've had a bunch of talented people on here, and you know that if you're a regular listener. Okay, here is me and Ron Klimek. So Ron, thanks for spending time with me today. I appreciate it. We're doing, as you know, kind of a test episode with a different setup than I typically use, but I appreciate you coming over to the
Thanks.
house.
I've often been called a pig, but a guinea pig is a refreshing improvement.
I was telling you before we hit record that I've only used this the primary piece of gear in our setup today, the Zoom H5 recorder, twice. One of them went well, the other one not so great. But anyway, we're both, for anybody who cares who's listening to this, we're using an H5 Zoom recorder, and we both have our own mics. We're using headphones that I'm not really sure we needed. I meant to test without, but it helps us a little bit, I think. So, yeah, hopefully it goes well.
Yeah, you sound better.
Good deal. I know you wondered why the heck I would want to interview you when I first asked, because you expressed as much, but one of the reasons was to do what we're doing. We're trying to set up out for my benefit, but the other one is because you are a musician, not so unlike myself in terms of the things that you've done in the past. You've kind of been the weekend warrior working musician,
yep.
Probably never full-time. Did I know that part?
For a brief period of about a year and a half, 2 years on the road. And then in our city, we did a party band kind of thing for several years. And that was about the most consistent aspect of it, yeah.
Cool. Were you doing a day job thing at the same time? Or?
Yeah, I was trying to eat. And actually, when we were touring on the road, I was the only one who kept the ledger. As a curious to see if we actually would be making any money. I was pretty naive back then, but interestingly enough, no. The answer was no.
That's funny. And I probably have told this to you before, but I don't think I've shared it on the podcast. But you mentioned needing to eat. I believe the drummer joke, one of my all-time favorites, is what is the difference between a drummer and a large pizza?
Yeah, large pizza feeds a family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can feed a family of 4.
Well, there's always humor and truth and vice versa.
Yep. So, and the podcast, I know you haven't listened to a lot of episodes, but the podcast is sharing stories from other independent musicians. Most of them have been full-time original artists, but not exclusively. I've had some guys that work at a really high level who are doing basically covers predominantly. In one case that comes to mind, one of the guys is full-time musician, and in another case, I've got a guy who could be if he wanted to, but he's got the very nice home in Los Gatos, California, and a family, and a good career that's outside of music. But his band, I call it a 12-headed monster. I think there are 12 members in the band.
Oh, yeah.
They do way over 100 gigs a year. I can't remember the number, but anyway. So yeah, getting back to why I wanted to have you on. Why I thought it would be fun. You're a musician. You've been doing it for a long time. We also share. I think we share this thing where we've had these periods where we weren't doing it so much.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think maybe you're coming out of one of those, and understandably because you also, like me, are an expat. You from Calgary?
Yes.
From Calgary in Canada. I will just call it the frozen tundra from all the things I've heard.
Well, at this moment in time, you'd be correct, yeah.
And you...
Barren wasteland.
Yeah. And you and your partner, Connie, have spent a number of years in Costa Rica, had a home there, and now you're here in Panama and happen to be our neighbors, which was fortuitous. I have this funny thing about living like almost next door to really fun musicians. That's been a recurring thing throughout my life. But anyway, you turn out to be that guy here in Panama. So.
Awesome. Well, we feel the same.
Thanks. I guess I'm trying to think back to the first time I saw you playing. I might have been at open mic at a place here called Picasso's, for anyone who's listening that cares about where we might go out and do things like open mic. Did we talk about music prior to that, or had I?
I think we did. We came out and heard you playing with a band here, and of course, having met you in that, and then we had briefly spoken about music, and I was playing, backing up a female jazz vocalist, and coming off of a long hiatus of playing to suddenly be thrust into that. But it was an interesting thing because it forced me to refresh that aspect of playing, right? And it was something. It's not what I preferred to do, but it was something, and I did. And there's an enjoyment to it because learning all those fancy chords and stuff like that. But it doesn't. It's not what I like to play. So having seen you play and having you as a neighbor, it was always in the back of my mind that once we get down here, if there was any possibility that we could hook up, it would be a thing that I would like to rekindle my musicianship with, So, and fortunately, we're making some progress in that area.
Yeah, and you were kind enough to indulge me in my having recently picked the guitar back up and decided I'm going to be a little more serious about my singing, and went back to open mic with me. So that was a lot of fun, and hopefully we think we're going to do a little bit more of the acoustic stuff maybe, but now we have something going that we just started that is super comfortable to both of us. And I think the third person we're involved with, a guy named Vali, who's an expat from Germany, who has a history in music of having run and owned a music school. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he's been, I guess, I want to say lifelong, but he seems to have a lot of years in it anyway, in recording and producing stuff. That's a great kind of guy to have in a band, in my opinion. He comes with a nice level of skill as a musician. He comes with a appreciation of high level gear in the department of his own instruments and PA and recording, which is like such a nice benefit for us.
Well, sound is everything. When you're putting it together, what comes out the front is really important. Back to the original question, I think the first time we played was at Picasso's. And it was for a benefit, raise a charity fundraiser for some worthy event here, worthy charity. And I approached you and some of the cohorts you were playing with at the time to come up and back up this singer. She's quite good, and we picked a few quasi jazz, but kind of pop tunes, and it was the first time I had an opportunity to play with the band in a lot of years, so it was pretty exciting. And
that was a fun experience. And I'm kind of laughing too, because the band, we all fancied ourselves as being versatile enough to just delve on the spot into some jazz, but it went okay. We had some funny moments. Unfortunately, people with a sense of humor.
That's jazz.
Yeah, that's jazz. Indeed. So one thing I've not had an opportunity to just ask you straight up is, what is your kind of your history as a musician? Why did you get into playing guitar? Was there another instrument before that? And why and when did you, and both of these are why and when did you get into playing in bands? Well,
I think first thing was my sister, who was an only child, had been playing the accordion. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that instrument. It's now used in Zydeco and things like that.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
A lot of ranchero music in Mexico, and actually I hear it in traditional music here in Panama too.
Oh yeah. No, I don't mean to demean it. It's anyway. She had been playing for a number of years. So it was only my father had played the violin, or fiddle, I guess would be more accurate. But so there was music coming from my father's side, and the guitar was just something that, as I don't know, I was maybe 10 years old. I saw it and liked it, and fortunately I made the right decision, because apparently the girls like it too. But no, I just got some lessons at a very early age, and because of a very fortuitous event in Calgary, there was a police sergeant who saw an opportunity to showcase young talent, and he arranged a television show, of all things, for this, and was able to put together a group of singers. A couple guys played the acoustic guitar and stuff like that, but this was all under, say, 15 or 16 years old, and so this TV show would happen weekly, and it was part of this school patrol thing. So the nice thing was people could come in and audition to get on this thing. So it was a core group that wound up being formed of about 6-8 singers, and our band showed up to audition, and they thought it was a great concept because kids backing up kids. Because, we were 14, 12, 13, somewhere around in that area. And so this whole little core, so that was what really catapulted us into playing, because from there we got to play for some community association dances and things like that. But we toured as part of this group. We did the, and this is probably before your time, but the Canadian Centennial in 1967. We were down in Ottawa. They flew us down there, and so it was a wonderful experience. And then subsequent to that, it was just a matter of there was some family politics that were going on that caused me to have to take a break for some formative musician years, to a greater or lesser benefit, I guess. But then after about, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, I started gigging around with a few guys sitting in here and there, and it was very spotty until about 1970, somewhere in there, and then I found a group and we toured across Canada a little bit, and then when that ended, we formed a little 3-piece, turned into 4, 5, and 6 eventually in Calgary, doing party bands and company functions and things like that, a few clubs. And that was very, very lucrative, actually, because we all had jobs, and this was just, fun and making a little bit of money. And in Canada, we were talking with guys from the States, and they say, man, we get paid nothing. But in Canada, you do a weekend gig, party gig, you made decent money. And not that we were getting wealthy off it, but it was good. A nice supplement. And, of course, you love to play. So that lasted for about 4, 5, 6 years, and then it's been a long time.
So, for the benefit of people who play, cover music, party bands, corporate gig bands, or whatever, who hang on to a day job or have bounced between not having a day job and balance, and not having one, having one, and keeping the music going. Maybe it would be worth sharing, if you have any thoughts on it. What are some of the, I know at a high level it's like, well, I need to eat, but when you think back about any moments where you thought, maybe I should do this full time, or I wish I'd have tried that a little longer full time, or what if I'd have done it differently, whatever. What are the kind of questions or things that you were maybe asking, or the self-talk that was going on around why you chose to maintain a career in some other vocation, or have a brief period where you're maybe doing music almost full time? What are the kind of things that, for you, if any, were like, yeah, this could be good, but I got to think about these things, and what if I did it this way? Or did you ever have that? Was it always like, I really like it just fine being having my day job and doing music?
Yeah, I think that for me, a lot of it was that lack of, something never struck me to do it. I think it was probably the road experience, and the poverty of subsistence living. But coming off the road and having that vacuum of now what do I do? That band broke up, and you get into the status quo of, well, I guess you get a job, and so that kind of got distracted. Having being approached subsequent to that for the party band thing, sophoncified my playing in that we were able to play, yet still, make a living, if you will. Which has afforded me the opportunity to come down to this country and
live
sort
a high
of
life.
Retirement. Well, and so I don't know that there was ever a moment where I thought this is all I want to do. As much as I love playing music, and I think that if you play, you get that sense. To me, it's like you're riding a motorcycle. You try to explain that experience to someone who doesn't ride, and they nod and they smile. Well, I think it's the same essentially with music. If you play, you get. And I used to teach, and I would tell my students, if you never make a dime playing music, if you never make a dime, you will get far more out of it than you will have put into it. And I get a kick out of these guys that you see in motorcycle magazines. The reason I talk about that is because we did motorcycling for a number of years. But when I want to forget the world, or this pressures of the day, I hop on my bike, and I go, yeah, I get that. but it's nothing like music. I've never found anything like music where I can pick up my guitar and within seconds, I'm in another planet. I'm in another world. And it's very zen. It's everything. Whereas if I hop on my motorcycle, first I got to get through that traffic. It's a different thing. But you can get, you have to be present-minded, and you can get a little bit of that zen thing going. But nothing like music. But yeah, so now I'm actually really looking forward to seeing where this is going to go for me. Sort of thing as I rekindle my love of the sport.
Yeah, as soon as I asked you the question, I started thinking back to my own conversation or my own reflection. I think for me, for a very brief time when I thought I'd like to do this full time, I look back and go, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do anything. And back when I was younger, compared, like today, when I talk to artists who are in the new music economy or the new music business, there's a ton of information, be it podcasts or
right.
Books, videos, influencers on social media, support groups on social media for musicians who want to have a sustainable career. And there's a lot of different options. And back, I think...
Not the least of which, if I may interject for just briefly, is the Unstarving Musician. I think that there's that title alone creates interest.
Exactly. But I think, both when you and I were younger, that it was a combination of sheer will and having the who luck of knowing the right people that believed in you, and not everyone had that. And we probably both have friends. I have one I refer to a lot, but I have a couple who, lived in that period, had an extremely successful music careers, and they did it through sheer will and a little bit of that who luck thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just dedication, and it's those are two things I didn't have the. I always like to say I didn't have the wherewithal to just like brute force myself into trying to make it work. But they're we all have to look at what's appealing to us at any given moment in life, and as I always say on the podcast, we have to make sure that whatever we're doing is whether it's music or anything else, we need to try and let it be something that makes us happy.
Exactly, and you're alluding to had friends that played. I came up, I guess, 10, 11, 12 years old. 12 years old, I guess, would be the age. There was another fella that I met at the time, and it was just in the periphery, not that we hung out or anything. We wound up going to the same school in high school together, but not a real solid hangout. But he took the path of musicianship. He sought real pro teachers. I mean, this guy went the path. And if I may humorously add to your comment about, you take that and say, I'm going to be a musician. That's it. You burn your bridge. You have no other usable skills. So you better be good.
Yeah, exactly.
You better hope that gene's in there. But this friend of mine turned out to be an absolutely incredible guitarist. Recognized, I remember, you get kind of caught up in the country thing up in Calgary there, but could play anything. He would, play, he'd learn the Nutcracker Suite for something to do, and brilliant guitarist. And recognized, I remember he was playing with a very prominent local musician. And the Ricky Skaggs band came through, and Ray Flack, and oh man, these guys can play, it's just, and Ray Flack was leaving the band, and the drummer and bass player asked this guy if he should audition for the band. That's how good they thought he was. So the guy was accomplished, but hard to make a living. You need to find a good woman. No, a good job. But, I saw that aspect, and I'm thinking, look at this guy, man. He plays brilliantly. He's paid. I've been to gigs where, the moment's just right, and the move, the emotion that just comes out of that playing, that beautiful playing, and yet starving.
Yeah.
And so you do back in that time, you're right. You come off that road. Who do you connect with? What's available? What is internet? What's a computer? Back then, we were touring with just 2 Shure stacks. And that was it. 2 little. But there wasn't that availability or ease of connection, so that you kind of fade off of it, But
yeah, you and I were talking about the advancement of technology. We were also marveling today about you mentioned the stacks. I am the proud owner of a pair of really nice
stereo speakers.
Yeah, EV. Yeah, I set them up like stereo speakers in my house, just so my poor wife won't have to realize that I have another piece of gear in here we're struggling to store anywhere. But
she'll appreciate the facial that you can get from sitting close to.
Yeah, but the gear's come such a long way. It's we laugh about it, about all the things.
Unbelievable.
For those of you listening, Ron is getting introduced to the world of, computerized mixing soundboards and all this stuff. And our new bandmate Volley comes over with a nice pro, rig. And I remember watching you marveling at his laptop going, is this your mixing board?
We party band, weekend gigs, and you're hauling these 6-foot boards and
yeah, exactly.
250-pound speakers. And it's quite a marvel, and a long way from, 2 paper cups with a string in between for monitors.
So I wanted to ask you too, we're both in Panama, and I was going to say
Don't
we're living
tell anybody
similar.
where.
I know. I was going to say we're living similar lives, but you're actually retired. I'm still on the hamster wheel. But I wanted to ask if you give much thought to what you hope for out of your sort of current new chapter in your music life, be it playing in this new trio that we put together, or maybe things that sort of go outside of that. Is there? Or are you just like, this is great, I'm just going to do it for now, and it hasn't really... Have you thought about it much?
Well, I'm hoping to supplement my meager retirement pension from the frozen tundra. Actually, we have been pretty occupied getting settled in, but I think at the end of the day, I'm looking forward to advancing my personal playing, and tuning that up and honing that a bit. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this trio goes. I think we have some good potential given some time. So I'm really looking forward to that. One of the things that I've always liked to do at great risk and peril, especially party band, a lot of times members come and go, but I've always liked to arrange songs. Who likes to do them straight off? Certain songs you just, like you call it, the low-hanging fruit. You do them because they're popular and people will enjoy them, and you enjoy playing them too. But I like to put a little something, because I think that part of being a musician is creating, and it's like, to me, I'm kind of not doing this from an ego standpoint, but I'm kind of mentoring this young Costa Rican fella that we met, and he's a great little artist, and I keep telling him, because I've heard it, and I think it's a great idea, to find his artistic voice, because he's doing these things, and I said, well, that's great, but what would you do if it was just, what would you do instead of doing these commissions like, dogs and faces and things like that? So I look at it that way, and not that maybe who knows in the future, original material or something, but at certain level, just taking a cover and saying, this is how we interpret it, or this, because, I see your drum and I think, wow, so I like to make space in a song to hear you play your drums. A lot of times when you're gigging, the drummer gets, that'll be 4 beer, please. But I think that I really appreciate the musicians, and it's probably an age thing too, but or period in your time. But I really appreciate the musicians, and I like to hear, have them shine or whatever, if possible, instead of just being part of a noise-making machine or something. Right?
Yeah, right. I'm starting to believe more and more that one of the best ways to find your creativity or your artistic voice is to forget about what anybody else is doing. And what I mean by that is, I assume this has gotten much harder today from when you and I were younger and first playing music because of social media. But what I mean by it is, don't worry about what your peers or would-be peers are doing, and spend a little more time just finding your own voice, as you say, and diving into whatever it is that excites you, because chances are you will find that there's a good number of people who appreciate what you're doing and every aspect of what you're trying to do and all the stuff that's underneath it. This is one thing that's very popular to talk about these days, and I do like it. It's an opportunity, as a recent guest of the podcast said, to connect with people just about anywhere in the world that we would otherwise never have an opportunity to do because of social media, and that is by sharing the journey, the struggles, the successes, the starts and stops with them. And I call it, letting people in your weird little world. They like this stuff.
Yeah, and if it's interesting and things like that. You alluded to, my career in music, if you will, and most of it was geared towards entertainment, if you will, dance and things like that. So it wasn't really an opportunity, or there wasn't any impetus to really do any original material or even go down that path. So I've never really been down that path, although I put a few things together, little ideas and that, but it was never done in public, because you always had to satisfy that commercial, satisfy the audience and give them something that they could dance to. So yeah, finding your voice was the only way I could, appease my desire to do that, sort of, if you will, to be a little creative, was to do arrangements and shots and, little things that you can do to a song. Or I get a kick out of the guy here. There's a guy here that he does covers. And I think the only way you can tell it's a cover is if you happen to know the lyrics. That's how outside he gets. But that's his voice, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a cool thing when people put enough into it and do it well.
Well, I think if you get too far outside the cover, you might as well write your own song.
Yeah, indeed. You start pissing your audience off a little bit. So I noticed from the little bit of playing that we've done so far that, or to me anyway, you seem to have an influence of the blues that lurks about in everything that you do on the guitar, and there's probably a lot of R&B under there too. And I'm arguably much less acquainted with R&B than with blues, but can you share what, A, is that accurate, and B, what are some of your influences musically?
Yeah, I thought you'd ask that. I think one of my early girlfriends was an influence that... No, okay, I digress. I really am a big fan, and I'm not a real huge fan, and this may be blasphemy to all these blues artists out there, but I'm not really a huge fan of a whole night of sort of traditional blues. Although there has been, that being said, there's a ton of really good blues music out there. I'll never forget Matt Guitar Murphy coming through Calgary and went down to this big blues club, and there's still some good blues clubs left in Calgary, but the King Eddie is defunct. And he came down, and I very progressive blues. I thought, wow, this is, this is taking blues to a realm that's wow, But for me, it's mostly been R&B. I really like funky R&B stuff, anything from James Brown to Earth, Wind and Fire, that kind of stuff. I got into Parliament and things like that. So I really like that kind of edge. Love horns. Came close to having 2 out of a 3-piece horn set one time, but and played with saxophone and stuff. But really loved horns and things like that. So that's what I like. So anything that kind of drives and along that vein. Yeah. And I think part of that was maybe an interesting anecdote or not. You decide. But when I was involved with this youth, these group. Once a month, every Saturday morning, they would show a film at this one theater for all these kids to go and partake. We performed for an hour first, and then there would be a movie or whatever. And there was I think it was forget what it was called, the Tammy Show. I think that was what it was called. And they broadcast this. And that's the first time I'd ever seen James Brown perform.
Oh, wow.
And of course, it was black and white. But so here we're watching this performance of James Brown. This guy's coming out and he's singing this stuff, and the horns are tight and all this stuff. And then he drops to his knees. And I thought, what? he's fainted, the poor guy. He's working too hard, and he drops down, and the guy comes, puts a cape on him and helps him off stage, and he breaks free from the cape, and he comes back out, and he sings a bit more, and he falls to his knees again. They put the cape on. I'd never seen anything like that, I'd never seen anything like that.
Oh,
and
wow.
we were just getting introduced into the Beatles were just coming around and stuff like that, which I thoroughly enjoyed, big influence too. But wow, that R&B just,
It's amazing. I have clearly not watched enough James Brown. I know he was quite theatrical, and
well, I couldn't comprehend what the concept was of the performance. But
that's so awesome.
The music was good.
I gotta see that. What do you? I don't know if you have ever or have had time to think about this, be it just from your own life perspective, or maybe because you know about mine enough for it to have at least occurred to you. That's something I've thought about. But if you had met someone tomorrow that was a musician and was thinking about doing the expat life, be it in Panama or anywhere else, have you had any experiences whatsoever thus far as an expat and a musician and somebody who's kind of getting back into playing again and having fun with it? Like what you would say to them, let's say you recognize they've got a really high level of enjoyment for their music. Is there anything that you would say, be it cautionary or otherwise, about moving from, say, a busy music market somewhere in Canada or the United States, and then coming to a place like Panama or maybe somewhere in Europe that's, just a lot different?
No. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I kind of dozed off there. Oh, no, I don't know if there's anything cautionary. I think, that you just... I mean, you look at my experience. I come down here. I, bring a guitar. Well, I had bought a guitar in Costa Rica because we were only there part time, so I wasn't going to ship guitars down and leave them there and to be consumed by the climate. But so I found some people there at a roadhouse, connected up with a few musicians there, and you jam. 6 guitars would show up, no bass player, no drums, and a couple of noodlers, and this is not good. So there was no real opportunity to put anything together there, but at least it was, you play a few things. But when coming here, I had no thoughts, no expectation, no anything. We come to this area just on a happenstance and wind up at Picasso's and, discover that there's this music thing going on, and to be able to connect. I guess I think the biggest thing is looking for is there enough of a community to support it. I mean, you can have a bunch of musicians sitting around, but if there's no, where do you play or what do you do? And they've got the Boquete Jazz Festival here, and or they call it a jazz festival, or is it a
Jazz and Blues Festival?
Jazz and Blues Festival.
Now there's going to be a second one of this from the same organization happening this coming year in 2020.
Yeah, we'll send this out to Volley. They, our bass player friend there, that there's no country festivals here in Panama. So happy to hear that. But so that was a big surprise. And I think if it's an integral part that you're coming from, that you've participated in, my only thing would be to research it first to make sure that that's there for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's now, as you alluded to earlier, there's all this online stuff. So you could put together a Skype band.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that if you all got together on some kind of Skype channel and then you could see your audience dancing in the back, I don't know.
Well, there are tons of opportunities now with the interwebs, with being able to, home recording is so accessible now. So certainly people are doing it, but certainly one could consider, well, could I record and publish music, some performances online in the way of video, and maybe supplement some of my creative desire. That way, if I'm moving to an area where maybe there's not as many opportunities to perform, if I happen to love that. A guy I recently had on the podcast, he comes from a decades-long career as a music producer in LA, and successful, and has some great stories that he shared. He moved to Malta, which is a pretty, I won't say remote, but it's not the epitome of urban density. And so he's doing house concerts there, which is great. He's a songwriter, so the new chapter of his career is he's done it in the world of producing, and he is a musician and a songwriter. So his new chapter is to do his own thing and put his own music out there, which he's doing now, and he's really good. But he's doing house concerts to fulfill that aspect of it. But he continues to record from home. He's got a new release out that's wonderful. He's learning the world of social media to share some of his thoughts with would-be tribesmen and women who want to follow him. So he's having a good time.
There seems to be a ton of that. And back, 20 years ago, I thought even in our city, if you could do some kind of infrared satellite imagery of our city, how many home studios would show up? And there's a ton of it going on. And I guess the challenge is, you say, okay, well, what can I do? I mean, I relate it to, for example, here, there's a guy who comes and performs at some of the little restaurants or whatever, and he's got all the computer gear, all the gear's there, and he's got a guitar and a mic, and he sings. And everything else is tracked, and he's got the whole band. He can have a 40-piece band behind him if he wants. Yeah. And he doesn't even have to play, but he noodles around a little bit, and it's great, and he's good and that stuff. And to me, I wrestle with that. I obviously I can sit and listen and enjoy the guy play, but I wrestle with that because it's not, it dehumanizes it in some aspect to me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And that to have, you and Volley and it's the challenge of putting that together and making that, and it's having a live human there, and we're working on this, and something might happen, and all that has more appeal, and it baffles me. So when you get into this, as you said earlier, with all this technology and all that stuff, it affords countless people the opportunity to obviously do their own thing, which is great. And the challenge then is getting that out and getting it to what? You do it for its own sake, right? And then I guess you do whatever you can to get it out there. Not unlike the Unstarving Musician podcast. You're trying to get that out and market on some level, which you should do. Otherwise, what's the point of... Well, I guess it's just the point of creativity, and maybe somebody will discover it in the archives in 2050 or whatever. But the challenge is to getting it out there and defining what I guess your end point is. I guess.
Yeah, and for however someone chooses to delve into their music, I guess it's all about, is it fun for me? Yes.
Yeah.
and they do it however they do it, and I'm kind of with you. I grew up. We both grew up admiring.
Well, that's a grand assumption.
Admiring the creations of groups of humans, and over time that continues to go. And over time, though, technology's made certain facets of performing music accessible that were not too long ago weren't possible, like the one you described. And there are a couple of others around here. And in fact, this is a weird one. There's a couple of guys here. I forget their names. Pretty popular. In terms of guys that play around Panama City and occasionally come out here. They're young, they look great. There's a bass player, singer, and a drummer, and they're both very talented. And it's just them and a lot of tracks, backing tracks. And I watch it, and from based on the market here, that those guys can produce danceable music that sounds really high quality, and they look good. It's very marketable.
We look the best we can.
Yeah, exactly. But yet, I just because of where I come from, I'm with you. Like there's a certain aspect of it that's a little disappointing because you want to see the human interaction as well. And there's a part of me that goes, can those guys even do it with a full band? I'm sure they can in that case, but it's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's kind of like the dehumanizing of music, I guess, in a sense, if I can, get this thought out. But with AI, the advent of AI and all this stuff, we'll no longer be necessary in the process.
Hopefully we'll realize the other things that we could be necessary for when that happens. But yeah,
Would you like to expand on that? I get a kick out of the story about the factory of the future will have two employees, a man and a dog. The man is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to keep the man away from the machines. So,
Yep.
But yeah, I still like the human. And I think at the end of the day, because there are still humans listening to music and watching music, that's still an enjoyable aspect. These people you watch that go to Picasso's, and there's that interaction. You see a good band, you're up dancing, and it's live. And if I may go back, even with the advent of all these disc jockeys that, what would you call them? DJs, yeah. We I guess somewhere in the mid to tail end of our party band career, if you will, these guys were starting to show up, and it was a matter of economy, I'm sure, for many clubs. They hire one guy, plays a bunch of music, and everybody's happy, sort of thing, And the bar owner has to deal with just one knob instead of several knobs up on stage.
Indeed.
Volume knobs, if you will. So when that was coming in, we were playing for a function at a place that had several rooms, and one of the rooms was having a wedding. And I don't know what was going on at the reception. Of course, they had a disc jockey. Not of course, but they had a disc jockey. And at times, the people would filter out from that room and come and dance where we were playing because it was a live band. And that kind of underscored something to me. They preferred to come and dance to the live band rather than the disc jockey. Mm-hmm. And so we went in to watch the disc jockey, and this guy had some lights flashing and the music playing, and he was standing on the front of the stage, kind of like, with his belly hanging out a little bit and a cigarette and a drink and nodding his head, watching the people. I thought, oh, man. Nice performance.
Yeah, good gig if you can get it. Yeah, the whole DJ thing, I'm learning about it as it exists in the world of music today, and it is a trip. It's really evolved. Some of it is actually pretty cool, but I lived through a lot of the same experience, that kill the DJ mottos we used to have it, but it's changed so much, and I've seen some perform out at street festivals, and I'm kind of enamored with what they're doing in some cases. I've seen there is a band I think that's still around called Incubus that has a guy that I think qualifies for DJ as part of the band, and they're a funk band, I guess, and that sort interlaces pop rock sounds. It's very cool. And then I have this new artist that I met through the podcast she's a great singer, she's a great songwriter. She kind of does this something between folk and electronic, I suppose. I forget the genre that she's anointed herself with, or that she's allowed people to anoint her with, but she loves...
Maybe she doesn't want to be in a box.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they always tell me, well, we have to be genrefied, just kind of the way it goes. But, yeah, she's really introduced me to parts of the DJ world that are pretty interesting, and she actually does a lot of work with them, contributing to loops that they'll use with the voice because she's a singer, and it's pretty fascinating. It's come a long way. Yeah,
well, I think that and of course, these are all just my opinions, which, but I think that every musical genre, whether it's country or rap or, DJing, if you want to do that, has a certain amount of cream that rises to the top. And that being said, I was thinking about music a few years back and wondering if it has deteriorated. And my thought was somewhat vitiated by, not vitiated, but underscored, I should say, by a recent documentary that I saw where this fella applied science, and I think we talked about it, to music today, the popular Billboard, if you will, music. And he discovered that using various parameters, tonal, quality, complexity of composition, all these parameters, you could probably dig them up on that computer thing, that fancy Etch-a-Sketch with the typewriter thing on the bottom. Anyway, it was really fascinating. to discover that, yes, music has deteriorated. It has gone down in quality according to the parameters that he was testing. And he even identified what he called the Millennial Hoop. Have you heard of that?
No.
And it's a construct in the composition of the tune where the notes rise up and then drop up and down. There's this up and down aspect that's kind of appealing to obviously millennials out there, and so much so that it's used formulaic. And apparently by this one guy, and I didn't remember his name, but he's a producer, I think maybe a composer, and he has written hits for many of the pop artists that we know out there using this formula. Plug in, here's your hit, go be a star, with this hoop thing in it.
That's
and
funny.
if you listen for it, you can hear it in many songs. So, you contrast that with what came through with the 60s and 70s and the creativity in that era, the Beatles, the Stones, and all that stuff that was going on. And you contrast that, it wasn't so formulaic. I mean, maybe She Loves You and all that stuff to a degree, but the subsequent stuff became very, and the Doors and all those guys, the Hendrixes, and coming through with all this incredible creativity. One of the things that really I enjoy is the remake Hendrix did on All Along the Watchtower, and I listened to that production and the depth and the sounds, and oh man, it's beautiful. So, as opposed to this boom boom,
Yeah, I think everyone any age who has studied pop music history, popular music history, can see some of the changes that you're alluding to. And one thing, maybe we will wrap up on this. I noticed, I have noticed in my lifetime that in each passing decade there appear to be, as you said, there's some cream that rises to the top, and they do something different that is memorable. At the time that it's happening, I can say for myself, I haven't always noticed it happening, and will pick up on it much later. And hopefully it's still happening. I do wonder, but I suppose in a lifetime, as you consume more and more music, you start to ask yourself, is music leaving me behind, or whatever it is, because you just it starts to either sound very different, or I like that the first time I heard it, when so and so did it. But yeah, I hope that we'll find that there's and probably if you and I sat down, we'd go, you know what, listen to this. This is actually pretty good. May not be the popular stuff, but it may be pretty good.
And that's the point right there. And I think, like you say, in closing, my thought would be that, there's always that pop top 40 chart or whatever it is, but percolating always is what you were just talking about, is that really cool, and maybe it's something foreign to our ears, but we listen to it going, yeah, that is groundbreaking, or that is new, that is cool. And it's always there. And from all these people who are on their computers in a room, putting this together all by themselves and stuff, keep going, because you never know, someday, somebody might take up a rock and find your CD under there. And,
I think you and I should make that our homework assignment, to go out and see what we can discover that's lurking about by young artists that are doing things that you and I would consider either groundbreaking or just high level to whatever extreme we might see it as.
Yeah, good point.
Would be fun.
Good little exercise. Yeah.
Would be fun. Perhaps we'll do that and share that on future episodes. Well, thanks for spending time with me. I've enjoyed this. Thanks for helping me suss out a possible gear scenario for doing these in-person interviews. It's kind of funny. I don't know. You surely noticed I wasn't I'm not like Joe Rogan. I wasn't doing a lot of eye contact. I actually haven't watched a full episode of his online. I've listened to many. He's a great podcaster. But and a lot of them do exactly what he does. Mine just are currently, sadly, going up to YouTube in an audio format with a still frame, to stare at if you want to listen to it that way. But this was fun
thanks
to do, and I was kind of staring down like I do when I'm talking to people on Skype for the podcast at my computer.
Well, that way you didn't notice my eyes were closed, I guess. And I prefer to think of it as investing time, and I think this was my time was well invested.
Well, thank you. Well,
thank you for having me.
Yeah. So those of you who are interested in what Ron's up to musically, to learn a little bit more about what he's doing, by the good fortune of our having gotten involved together with this other chap we referred to, we've thrown up a Facebook page, which you can find on Facebook at RV2 Music or RV2, and that's R as in
what?
Oh, there I did it again. R2V, excuse me.
Are you dyslexic?
Yeah, this is sad, so I'll share the funny story. I published a Facebook page for the band, or I created one rather, and I switched R2V with RV2. And if you've ever asked Facebook to change the name of your page, you may have experienced something very bad in their immediate canned response that, sorry, we can't do this. It violates, Facebook policy for blah, 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 blah. So it took me about 4 or 5 days to get it done. And those of you that are going, what, you did it in 4 or 5 days? I've been at it for a month. Shoot me a message and I'll tell you how it happened. But there, I just did it again. So yeah, R2V, and the R2 is for Ron and moi, Rabanzo, and V is for Volley, our cohort in this. So we do have a Facebook page, and I have, yes, finally, those of you who are regular listeners have been listening to me talk about Bandzoogle for the web platform for musicians. I finally moved my own artist page over to that platform. So now Rabanzo.com is working again. I'm going to put up a post about Ron and R2V and what we're up to there. So you'll be able to, in the coming... Well, by the time you hear this episode, you will absolutely be able to find that. We're recording this at the end of 2019 in December, so when you do hear this, you'll be hearing it from future me.
We're mostly up to no good.
Yes, it's true. Thanks again, Ron. We will definitely be talking again. Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Have you heard of Bandzoogle? Yep, they're powering websites for musicians all over the world. Their easy system will get you online fast. They have tons of mobile-friendly templates to help you custom design your site and content. It's built for musicians by musicians. They make it easy to sell merch, grow your email list, integrate your socials, and they offer support from a musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans are affordable. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a free trial, and be sure to use the promo code Rabanzo to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Rabanzo, ROBONZO. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.